My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
In the West, we remember the year 2003 with no fondness. 2003 was the year American and British interests coalesced in the invasion of a sovereign nation, Iraq. The invasion ended in the toppling of one of history's most brutal dictators, but the motives and justifications for the conflict were met with doubt. Officially, it was to remove non-existent weapons of mass destruction from Saddam Hussein's hands, but some more populist voices say it was to free up Iraqi oil for exploitation. Other, more authoritative voices claim it was to build a democratic ally in the Middle East, and some go further, saying it was a humanitarian endeavor. This video is not about that conflict. Rather, it is about the reactions of two regional powers, Saudi Arabia and Iran. The fall of Saddam Hussein was a catastrophe, not because he was some benevolent leader. He was in fact the complete opposite of that, but because the stability he brought to Iraq died with him in the gallows. A stability that was an essential power balance between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Without Saddam Hussein, Iraq fell into a chaotic maelstrom of terrorism and political conflict, which neither regional power wanted. In 2003, Saudi Arabia and Iran lost their most important buffer state, and a chain reaction set off what would culminate in today's Middle Eastern Cold War. The Middle East, or Arab Cold War, is no new occurrence. Many historians claim it has been going on since the 70s. Some say the 50s, and others go as far back as the fall of the Ottomans in 1918, which gave the Middle East its modern borders, drawn without regard for ethnic, tribal, or religious affiliations. But to understand what's going on in the Middle East, we have to understand why it's going on. Division permeates all over the Arabian Peninsula and throughout the Arab world. The first and most famous one is the religious divide between Sunni and Shia Islam. After all, the rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran follow Sunni and Shia Islam respectively. But this is only partly a factor, and in all honesty is a gross Eurocentric oversimplification. As former CIA analyst and Middle East expert Kenneth M. Pollack once said, Westerners always make a mistake by drawing an analogy between the Sunni-Shia split and the Protestant Catholic split within Christianity. The Sunni-Shia split was never as violent. In actual fact, the conflict is far more complex, arising out of a rainbow of economic, social, and political factors. A major one would be oil, particularly Saudi Arabia's oil. Ever since it was discovered in the region, it has served as the country's primary source of wealth, concentrated mostly in the hands of the elite. This wealth attracted Saudi Arabia's biggest ally, the United States, who have backed the Saudis ever since. On the other side of the Gulf, oil gave Iran instability rather than safety. Foreign intervention in Iran, which resulted out of a lust for oil, has long been a primary cause of the country's inner turmoil and created a fervent anti-Western population. This was exacerbated in 1953 when Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was overthrown in a US and British-backed coup, replaced with the pro-Western and brutal absolute monarch Shah Reza Pahlavi. But before the standoff between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the Arab Cold War was fought by a very different country entirely, Egypt. In 1952, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser led the Egyptian Revolution, seizing control of the country and creating an anti-Western Arab nationalist state. From there, he attempted to inspire the people of neighboring countries to do the same, overthrow the corrupt leaders and expel Western imperialism once and for all. After that, he dreamed of a united state stretching from Morocco in the west to Iraq in the east. With the exception of Libya and Syria, his dreams failed. Nasser's revolution would be stopped some years later when the pro-Western absolute monarchies of Saudi Arabia and Iran united to defeat Egyptian-backed militias in Yemen. This would be the last time in history that Saudi Arabia and Iran were united against a common foe. After Nasser's defeat, the two would continue their divergence. The Saudis remained on the side of the US, backed up by a population of loyal supporters. Iran, on the other hand, gradually slid into turmoil as the Shah Shah ruled with terror over a disloyal populace. In 1979, this turmoil came to a head in the Iranian Revolution, which saw the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an even more despotic Islamic theocracy, ruled by fundamentalist Islamic clergymen. This was one of the most significant events in history, and sent shockwaves throughout the Middle East, causing the Saudis to tremble, fearing they would be next. And these were not unfounded fears, because very shortly afterwards Iran began exporting its revolution, backing Shia militias in Iraq, Afghanistan and, most importantly, within Saudi Arabia itself. To combat this revolutionary aggression, the Saudis established the Gulf Cooperation Council, the NATO of the Middle East united against Iran. The status quo wouldn't be established until 1990, when Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran was crushed, setting Iraq up as the buffer between the Saudis and Iran, who reluctantly agreed to keep him around for the greater good. In the meantime, both countries financed proxy conflicts in neighboring states, Lebanon, Yemen, Israel and the like, both seeking dominance of the Middle East. And that's where we arrive back at where we began, in 2003 in the death of Saddam Hussein, the end of the status quo. After that, a power vacuum presented itself, and the conflict would escalate, bringing us to today's state of affairs in the Arab world. Today, Saudi Arabian and Iranian influence is felt all over the Middle East. Every conflict is covered with their fingerprints and is characterized mainly by one divide, whether they are anti-Western or anti-Iranian. Basically, countries and factions are either ideologically aligned with Iran or fully opposed to them. On the surface, the conflict is between the Saudis and the Iranians, but in actual fact it is more like the United States against Iran. Saudi Arabia is a state that exists at the will of its more powerful ally. Without American support, the Saudis would be a distant memory. Saudi Arabia possesses the 17th strongest military in the world, but for all intents and purposes, it's a laughingstock. The Saudi military has become so reliant on American support that its structure, organization and morale are now totally inept, something not helped by the fact that merit is not rewarded. Instead, family or tribal status will lead you to a promotion. Contrast this with the state of the Iranian military, which is the 14th strongest in the world. Their army is united in the ideology of the Islamic Revolution, willing to die for their Ayatollah to defeat the disgusting and depraved Westerners. Furthermore, Iran is in possession of the globally feared Revolutionary Guard, an organization independent of the Iranian government consisting of only the most fanatical and zealous defenders of the Islamic Revolution.
The Revolutionary Guards were created in order to preserve the revolution so that the United States could not carry out a counter coup or a coup, not a counter coup, but a coup in the country.
And the Quds Force was created by the Guards to train proxy groups outside Iran, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Iranian-backed fighters have been used to support pro-regime forces in Syria and help Shia militias fight ISIL in Iraq.
The conflict escalated in 2011, when the Arab Spring began toppling regimes all throughout the Arab world. The protests petrified the ruling elites of Riyadh, but in Tehran they saw an opportunity to weaken Saudi influence and export their revolution further. An example would be in Yemen, which, since 2014, has been suffering one of the most devastating civil wars in history. Shortly after the war's beginning, Shia Zaidi Muslims, also known as the Houthis, quickly seized Yemen's capital of Sana'a, with Iranian support. The Saudis and UAE then backed the Yemeni government, despite having nothing in common with them ideologically. However, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Yemeni government remain united in one goal: the expulsion of Iranian influence from Yemen. And currently they are failing. Yemen has been referred to by many as Saudi Arabia's Vietnam. The Saudis are pouring millions upon millions of funds into their war effort in Yemen, which has consisted of on-the-ground operations, a tactic which has been proven worthless against a guerrilla organization. Yemen is an important country geopolitically. Whoever owns Yemen owns the entrance and exit to the Red Sea, and thus a huge chunk of global shipping. As well as this, its Saudi border is undefined, stretching hundreds of miles across indefensible desert, with scarcely a barrier in sight. The Saudi army's lack of skill has caused them to stalemate. Meanwhile, Iran needs to spend only the bare minimum to keep the rebels fighting. When the Houthis captured the capital of Sana'a, a close advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei said, "3 Arab capitals, Beirut, Damascus and Baghdad, have already fallen into Iran's hands and belong to the Iranian Islamic Revolution." He then claimed Sana'a was the 4th. And by every metric he was right. Whilst the Saudis ally themselves with unstable regimes and militias, Iran allies itself with what are effectively puppets. In Baghdad, Iraq, America arrogantly believed their new democratic government would remain loyal and grateful for America's liberation. They then were shocked to discover the Iraqi people were actually outraged by US conduct in the war and began electing pro-Iranian Shia politicians to government, allowing their influence to thrive. In their attempt to create an ally, America created an Iranian puppet. Lebanon is a bastard state, made up of a patchwork of different people groups that never managed to form a central government, due to intense, decades-long sectarian violence, something which Iran has taken full advantage of. The government in Lebanon is made of 3 factions: Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, and Maronite Christians, all of which are essentially foreign puppets, making Lebanon a playground for foreign powers. Iran supports the Shia faction through its puppet militia Hezbollah, a group founded by Lebanese Shiites through Iranian support. They have terrorized Lebanon and dominated its politics for decades. In Syria, the civil war has allowed for another Saudi-Iranian proxy conflict. The Saudis, along with most of the West, back the rebels, while the Iranians back the brutal Assad regime. Since the war's beginning in 2011, the world has held its breath, waiting to see who would come out on top. Whoever does will decide whether Saudi Arabia or Iran will dominate the region. This complex web of interests and support repeats in many other nations. Qatar was blockaded from 2017 to 2021 by every Gulf state for developing closer ties with Iran. Bahrain has experienced increased repression from the Saudi-backed government as Iran continues to support the Arab Spring protests. And now another actor is beginning to get involved, wishing to take advantage of the divisions to reinstate itself in the Middle East. That actor is Turkey. Turkey, under its autocratic president, Recep Erdogan, is obsessed with the idea of a neo-Ottoman empire, establishing itself as the primary power in the Middle East, like it was before World War I. Turkey has now involved itself in a multitude of proxy conflicts throughout the Arab world, most notably in Libya, where Turkish drones single-handedly turned the tide of the civil war in favor of the government of national accord. But in November 2019, Turkey showed how far it's willing to go to achieve the goal of neo-Ottomanism when it invaded northern Syria to crush the Kurdish rebellion. The invasion saw brutal atrocities committed against the Kurdish populace. With every passing day, the Middle East grows more and more unstable as the 2 regional powers duke it out at the expense of those underneath. There is no sign that the Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran will end anytime soon, as the Arab Spring continues to ripple throughout the desert. Every day, more and more actors are getting involved. Turkey, Russia, Israel, and so on. Perhaps it will go the way of the previous Cold War. Maybe the side driven by ideology will once more collapse under its own weight. Maybe the side driven by opposition to that ideology will collapse into infighting, or at least more infighting. Who knows? What is certain, however, is that your Change.org petition is going to do fuck all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy content like this, then you should like and subscribe for more. This video was inspired by the book The New Map: Energy, Climate and the Clash of Nations by Daniel Yergin, which is a book about how energy conflicts shape the climate of geopolitics, and it also has a very interesting and detailed chapter about the current state of the Middle East. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely check it out. A link to buy it will be in the description. Again, thank you for watching, and goodbye.